I am in this room with you right now, and something is about to break tonight. Not you, not your spirit, not your faith, not the parts of you that have already survived more than anyone around you fully understands. What is breaking tonight is the thing that has been holding you back, the invisible weight that has been sitting on top of your life for longer than you have wanted to admit. And I need you to hear that clearly before this message goes any further. I see the financial pressure that has been the background noise of every single day for longer than feels reasonable. The number that does not move no matter how carefully you plan, the bills that arrive faster than the solutions do, the sense that you are always one step behind a gap that refuses to close. You have done the math more times than you can count, rearranged the same limited resources in every configuration you could think of, and the pressure remains exactly where it has been, heavy and constant and exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with laziness or poor planning and everything to do with a season that has lasted too long. I see it. I know the specific number. And I am telling you tonight that what has been holding that situation in place is breaking. Not slowly, not eventually, but beginning right now while you listen to this. I see the relationship that has been carrying tension for longer than you have spoken about out loud. The conversation that keeps almost happening and then does not. The distance that grew so gradually you cannot point to the exact moment it started. Only that one day you noticed it had become the new normal between you and someone who used to feel close. You have wondered whether the distance is permanent, whether the version of that relationship you remember is something you can still get back to, or whether too much time and too much silence have already decided the outcome. I see that relationship, and I see what has been holding it in a frozen state, neither healing nor fully ending, just sitting in an uncomfortable middle that drains you every time you think about it. That frozen state is breaking tonight. I see the spiritual exhaustion, the place where your relationship with me has felt more like routine than relationship, more like obligation than connection. You have shown up, you have gone through the motions, you have said the words even when they felt hollow leaving your mouth, and underneath all of it there has been a quiet question about whether any of this is actually working, whether the version of faith you are practicing is producing anything real, or whether you are simply maintaining a habit out of fear of what happens if you stop. I see that exhaustion, and I am telling you that what has been creating the disconnect between the faith you practice and the faith you actually feel is breaking tonight as well. 3 specific weights: financial pressure that will not move, relational distance that will not close, spiritual exhaustion that will not lift. All 3 have been held in place by something, and that something is what I am addressing tonight. Not the surface symptoms, but the underlying structure that has kept all 3 locked, exactly where they have been. Stay. Do not close this. What I am about to describe is the actual mechanism of what breaks tonight, and you need to understand it clearly to recognize it when it happens. I want to talk about what has actually been holding you back, because I do not think you have fully named it yet. It is not bad luck. It is not a lack of effort on your part. It is not even primarily the actions of other people, though some of what has happened to you did involve other people making choices that hurt you. What has been holding you back is an agreement, made somewhere in the middle of the difficulty, that this is simply how your life works now, a quiet settlement with the circumstances, an acceptance that this is the season you are in, and there is nothing to do but manage it as well as possible until it eventually changes on its own. I understand why you made that agreement. After enough disappointment, lowering the expectation feels like wisdom rather than surrender. But I am here tonight to break that agreement, because it was never true, and it was never meant to be permanent, and the longer it stays in place, the longer the circumstances around it stay frozen as well. I want to speak directly to the enemy right now, not to you. To the one who has been working to keep that agreement in place, the one who has been whispering that this is simply your portion, that other people get breakthroughs, but your situation is different, more complicated, less likely to resolve the way you have been hoping. I am addressing you directly because what you have constructed in this person's mind, the quiet ceiling on what they believe is possible for their own life, is coming down tonight. You convinced them to settle for less than what I planned. And that strategy is failing as I speak these words. This life is covered. What you built against them is breaking apart in real time, and they are about to walk into something that you have no access to prevent. It is finished. And now I am speaking back to the one who is listening. I know the agreement you made was not weakness. It was survival. You did what you needed to do to keep functioning under pressure that would have broken many people, and the fact that you adjusted your expectations rather than collapsing entirely is its own kind of strength, even though it has not felt like strength while you were living inside of it. But survival mode was never meant to be permanent, and I am ending it tonight. Not by asking you to simply think more positively, but by directly intervening in the structures that have been keeping you there. Chosen. You are not assigned a smaller life than the one I originally planned for you. The agreement you made with your circumstances does not override what I wrote for you before any of this difficulty began. I am breaking the agreement tonight and replacing it with what was always true. I want to go back to the financial pressure and speak to it with more specificity than I have given it yet, because I do not want this to feel like a general encouragement disconnected from the actual numbers you are facing. I know the exact figure that represents the gap in your life right now, the amount that would need to appear for the pressure to genuinely lift, rather than simply be managed for one more month. I know how long you have been carrying that figure in the back of your mind, doing silent calculations during ordinary moments of your day, feeling the weight of it, even when you are trying to focus on something else entirely. I want you to understand that what is breaking tonight is not a small adjustment to that situation. It is not a temporary patch that holds for a few weeks before the same pressure returns in a different form. What I am doing is addressing the root cause that has kept this financial season locked in place for as long as it has lasted, and the provision that follows is going to be specific enough that you will not be able to attribute it to coincidence or to your own effort alone. Before the days ahead are finished, you are going to see movement in this area that surprises you, that arrives through a source you were not expecting, that demonstrates clearly that something shifted beyond what natural circumstances alone would have produced. I want you to hold that expectation tonight rather than the smaller, more cautious hope you have been protecting yourself with. The caution has been reasonable given how long the wait has lasted, but I am asking you to set it aside tonight and receive the larger hope instead. I want to speak now to the relationship that has been frozen in distance, because I think there is a fear underneath the situation that you have not fully acknowledged. The fear that reaching out will not be received the way you hope, that the attempt to close the gap will instead confirm that the gap is permanent, that trying and failing will hurt more than simply leaving things as they are. I understand that fear, and I am not asking you to act recklessly or to force a resolution before the timing is right. What I am telling you is that I am working in the situation independently of your next move, softening what needs to be softened, preparing what needs to be prepared, creating an opening that did not exist before. When the moment comes for you to act, and it is coming soon, you are going to sense a different quality to it than the previous attempts that did not land the way you hoped. This time, the ground will have already shifted before you take the step, and the step itself will feel less like a risk and more like walking through a door that has already been opened. Alone. You have felt alone in carrying the responsibility of this relationship for longer than is fair, wondering whether you are the only one who still cares enough to want it healed. I am telling you that the loneliness in that specific situation is ending, because I am moving in both directions, not only in your heart but in the heart of the person on the other side of the distance as well. I want to speak to the spiritual exhaustion now, the disconnect between practiced faith and felt faith that has been weighing on you quietly. I want you to understand something important about that disconnect. It is not evidence that your faith has failed, or that you are doing something fundamentally wrong. Spiritual seasons of dryness happen to people who are walking faithfully just as much as they happen to people who are drifting, and the presence of the dryness is not a verdict on the sincerity of your belief. What has kept that dryness in place, however, is the same agreement I mentioned earlier, the quiet settlement that this is simply how your spiritual life feels now, this distant, dutiful, disconnected version, rather than the vivid and alive connection you remember from earlier seasons or have heard described by others. I am breaking that settlement tonight as well. The reconnection you are hoping for is not going to require you to perform your way back into feeling close to me through more discipline or more effort. It is going to happen because I am moving toward you, closing the distance from my side, making myself undeniably present in a way that bypasses the performance entirely and reaches the actual relationship underneath it. Here. I am here, in this room, breaking every agreement that has held your life in a smaller shape than the one I designed for you. Stay with me. There is more I need to say about what comes next. I want to talk about what it has cost you to maintain the agreement you made with your circumstances, because I do not think the cost has been fully visible to you while you were living inside of it. Every day you woke up and managed rather than expected. You were spending energy that was meant for something else. Energy that should have gone toward building and creating and moving forward, rather than toward simply enduring what felt unchangeable. That management has been quietly draining you in ways that are harder to notice than a single dramatic crisis would be, because it has been the slow accumulation of small disappointments rather than one obvious wound you could point to and address directly. I see the cumulative weight of that slow drain, and I want you to know that tonight, as the agreement breaks, the energy that has been consumed by management is going to become available again. You are going to notice it gradually over the coming days, a return of capacity you had stopped expecting to feel, a lightness in places that have felt heavy for so long. You assumed the heaviness was simply part of who you are now. It is not part of who you are. It was part of a season, and the season is ending. I want to address the specific fear that even if something shifts tonight, it will not last, that you will experience a temporary improvement followed by a return to the same frozen patterns that have defined the recent stretch of your life. I understand that fear because you have likely experienced false starts before, moments that felt like breakthrough followed by a slide back into the same difficulty. What I am doing tonight is different because I am not addressing the surface symptoms alone. I am breaking the underlying agreement itself, the actual structure that has been producing the financial pressure, the relational distance, and the spiritual exhaustion simultaneously. When the structure breaks, the symptoms that grew from it do not simply pause temporarily. They lose their foundation entirely. Chosen. You were chosen for a wider, fuller, more abundant version of life than the one the agreement has confined you to. What I am doing tonight returns you to that wider version, not as a temporary visit, but as your new baseline going forward. I want to close this first part by speaking directly to the version of you that has become skilled at lowering expectations as a form of protection. That version learned, through real experience, that hoping for too much and watching it not arrive hurts more than simply expecting less from the start. I'm not asking you to abandon that protective instinct through sheer willpower tonight. I am asking you to set it down for the length of this message, just long enough to receive what I am saying without the usual filter of caution that has kept you safe, but has also kept you smaller. The agreement is breaking whether you fully believe it tonight or not, because what I am doing does not require your complete certainty to begin working. It only requires my willingness to act, and I am willing. And I am already moving in the structures that have held your life in this frozen shape for far too long. Stay with me through what comes next. The most specific part of what I have to say is still ahead. I want to say one more thing before this section ends. Something about the timing of tonight specifically. You did not arrive at this message by accident on this particular evening. The timing of when you opened this is not random. And I want you to receive that as truth rather than as a comforting phrase that sounds spiritual, but means nothing concrete. Tonight is the night the agreement breaks, because tonight is when I chose to break it, and the fact that you are here, listening, present, still willing to receive after everything that has worn down your expectations, that presence matters more than you currently understand. I am not finished. There is more to say, and I need you to stay through it. I want to describe specifically what breaking looks like, because I do not want you to spend the coming days waiting for something dramatic and obvious while missing the actual signs of what I'm doing. Sometimes breaking happens suddenly, an unmistakable shift that arrives all at once and changes the entire shape of a situation in a single moment. Other times breaking happens as the first crack in something that has felt solid and permanent, an initial sign that the structure is no longer holding the way it once did, followed by a process of full collapse over the following days and weeks. I want you to watch for both possibilities, rather than assuming that nothing has changed if the change does not arrive instantly and completely. In the financial situation, watch for an unexpected opportunity, a conversation that opens a door you were not pursuing, a piece of information that changes your understanding of a resource you already had access to but had not fully recognized. Watch for a sense of clarity about a decision you have been avoiding, a clarity that did not exist before and that suddenly makes an obvious next step visible where confusion used to be. In the relationship, watch for a softening, a moment where the usual tension does not arrive the way it normally would, a small opening in a conversation that would have previously stayed closed. Pay attention to these small signs rather than waiting only for the dramatic reconciliation scene you may have imagined. Breakthroughs often begin small and build, and dismissing the small signs as insignificant means missing the actual beginning of what you have been hoping for. In the spiritual exhaustion, watch for a moment of unexpected connection, a sentence in Scripture that suddenly lands differently than it has in months, a wave of peace that arrives without explanation during an ordinary part of your day. These are not coincidences. They are the early evidence of the agreement breaking, the first signs that the distance between practiced faith and felt faith is beginning to close. Impossible. What I am describing may feel impossible given how entrenched these three areas have become over the recent season. I am not asking you to understand the mechanism. I am asking you to watch for the evidence with attention rather than dismissing it because it does not look exactly like what you expected. I want to speak now about what comes after the initial breaking, because I do not want you to mistake the first crack for the complete resolution and then feel disappointed when more work remains to be done. Breaking the agreement that has held your life in this frozen shape is the beginning of the process, not the entire process itself. Once the structure breaks, there will be a period of rebuilding, and I want you to expect that rebuilding rather than being surprised by it. The financial situation may not resolve in a single dramatic event, but rather through a sequence of provisions that build on each other over the following weeks, each one further demonstrating that something genuinely shifted. The relationship may not heal in one conversation, but through a series of smaller moments of reconnection that gradually restore what distance slowly eroded. The spiritual exhaustion may not lift in a single night of renewed passion, but through a gradual return of connection that deepens as you continue showing up with the openness you are demonstrating right now by staying through this message. I want you to commit to staying present through that rebuilding process rather than expecting the entire situation to resolve completely tonight and becoming discouraged if work remains in the days that follow. Testimony. What you are about to walk through, the breaking and the rebuilding both, is going to become a testimony about a season that looked permanently frozen and turned out not to be. I want to address the people who have watched you carry these three weights and have perhaps drawn conclusions about your situation that do not match what I'm about to do. Some of them have decided that this is simply your portion in life, that the financial pressure and the relational distance and the spiritual dryness are permanent features of who you are, rather than a temporary season that is ending. I want you to release the weight of their conclusions, because their conclusions were based on watching the middle of a story without access to the ending I have already written. You do not need to convince them of anything before the breaking happens. You only need to stay present long enough to let it happen, and the evidence that follows will speak more clearly than any explanation you could offer in advance. I want to talk about what happens to the energy you have spent maintaining the lowered expectations once the breaking is complete. That energy does not simply disappear into nothing. It becomes available for something new, for the next assignment, the next purpose, the next season of building. that has been waiting for you to have the capacity to step into it. I have specific plans for that returning energy, plans that have been delayed not because the timing was wrong, but because the capacity required to walk into them was tied up in managing what the agreement had created. As the agreement breaks and the management is no longer required, that capacity returns. And I want you to remain open to stepping into something new as you feel that energy come back over the following weeks. One more day. Give me one more day to continue what has begun breaking tonight, and the day after that, because some structures collapse instantly, and others take a few days to fully come down even after the first crack appears. Either way, I am not finished after tonight. I am continuing this work for as long as it takes to complete what I started in each of the 3 areas I named. Tomorrow is different. Not because every weight will be completely lifted by morning, though for some of you elements of this will move faster than you expect. Tomorrow is different because the frozen season has ended, and movement has begun in situations that felt permanently stuck. Walk into tomorrow watching for evidence rather than assuming nothing has changed, simply because the change does not look exactly like what you pictured. I am breaking the agreement that held you in a smaller life than the one I designed. You stayed through this entire message, and that decision is part of what makes tonight different from every other night you have spent carrying these same 3 weights alone. I want to go deeper into the financial situation because I think there is a layer underneath the surface number that has not been fully addressed yet. The pressure you feel is not only about the specific gap between what you have and what you need. It is also about what that gap has meant to your sense of identity, the quiet fear that the financial difficulty says something about your worth or your competence or your standing in comparison to people around you who do not seem to be carrying the same weight. I want to address that fear directly because it has been adding a layer of shame on top of an already difficult situation, and shame makes every other part of the struggle heavier than it needs to be. The financial pressure you have been carrying does not reflect a failure on your part. It reflects a season, shaped by circumstances that were not entirely within your control, layered with decisions that made sense given the information you had at the time. I am not assigning blame to you for where you currently stand, and I need you to stop assigning blame to yourself as well. Release the shame tonight along with the agreement, because the shame has been quietly reinforcing the very structure I am breaking, telling you that you deserve the difficulty, rather than recognizing it as simply a season that is ending. I want to speak further about the relationship, because I think there is something you have not said out loud even in your own private thoughts. Part of the distance has been protective on your end as well, not only on the other side. You have pulled back in small ways because getting close again and being hurt again felt like a risk you were not certain you could survive emotionally. I see that protective instinct, and I am not asking you to abandon wisdom about who deserves your full vulnerability. What I am asking is that you remain open to the specific reconciliation I am orchestrating, recognizing that what I am preparing is different from simply returning to a previous dynamic that may have had real problems within it. I am not asking you to return to what was broken before. I am building something restored, which is not identical to what existed previously, but is rooted in the same relationship, now strengthened by what both of you have learned through the season of distance. I want to close with a word about the spiritual exhaustion specifically, because I think the deepest fear underneath that exhaustion is the fear that you have somehow lost something permanently, that the vivid connection you once felt was a phase of your life that does not return once it fades. I want to tell you clearly that nothing has been lost permanently. What feels distant has not disappeared. It has been waiting, the same way I have been waiting, present the entire time even when the felt connection went quiet. Tonight, as the agreement breaks in the financial and relational areas, I am also breaking it here, in the place where you have felt furthest from me despite showing up faithfully through the dryness. The reconnection is not going to require you to manufacture a feeling through more effort. It is going to arrive because I am moving toward you, closing every distance at once, in every area where distance has been allowed to settle for far too long. I am in this room with you right now. I am breaking what has been holding you back in every direction simultaneously. Receive this tonight. Watch for the evidence tomorrow. And when you see it, however small it appears at first, stop and acknowledge it as exactly what it is. I want to say something final about the nature of waiting itself, because even after the breaking begins tonight, there will still be a period of time between the first evidence and the full resolution, and I want you prepared for that period rather than expecting everything to be completely finished by tomorrow afternoon. Waiting after breakthrough has already begun feels different than waiting before breakthrough has started, even though both involve time passing without complete resolution. The waiting that comes after tonight is not the same frozen, stagnant waiting you have been experiencing throughout this season. It is active waiting, waiting in motion, waiting while things are genuinely shifting beneath the surface, even if the full visible result has not yet arrived. I want you to hold the distinction between those two kinds of waiting clearly in your mind over the coming days. If you notice that another week has passed without every single area being completely resolved, do not interpret that as evidence that nothing actually happened tonight. Interpret it as the natural unfolding of a process that has genuinely begun, a process with its own timeline that I am managing with full attention even when the pace feels slower than you would prefer. I have never been late to anything I promised to do in someone's life, even when the timing did not match what they expected or hoped for. What I begin, I complete, and what I am beginning tonight in your finances, in your relationship, and in your spiritual connection is going to complete fully, even if the complete picture takes some additional time to become fully visible. Trust the process as much as you trust the moment of breaking itself. Both matter. Both are part of what I am doing in your life starting right now, in this room as you listen to these final words before this message closes. I am with you. I am breaking what needed to break, and I am not leaving until the rebuilding is finished as well.